number 121. Psalm number 121. I don't know how many of you remember it. This has been a few years back, but on a Wednesday night, this is one of the psalms that, and when we were doing memory, that we memorized. I think this is probably one of, at least I think, the most encouraging psalms. They're all encouraging, don't get me wrong, but this one I think is a definite encouragement for people who are going through life's journeys. And one of the things, life is a journey when you begin to think about it. And particularly once you get saved, you're on a journey to heaven. And as you go, this is probably one of the greatest reminders that we have, that God is watching out for us. He keeps an eye on His people, and He takes care of His people. People will let you down. People can be very discouraging at times when you focus on them. And I hear people say, because I'm one of those people who say, keep your eye focused on Jesus, and life will not be nearly as discouraging. And yet I have people say to me, well, that's just not that easy. I know, folks, I struggle with it too. But it's a necessary part of life as a believer to keep focused if we're going to keep focused. Do you understand what I mean when I say that? If we don't focus on Him, it's hard to keep focus on the work that God has given us to do. So I'm going to read this psalm, and then I will make some comments, and hopefully they will be an encouragement or a help to you. He says here, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from which cometh my help. My help cometh from the Lord, which made heaven and earth. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved. He that keepeth thee will not slumber. Behold, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is thy shade, the Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. The sun shall not smite thee by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord shall preserve thee from all evil. He shall preserve thy soul. The Lord shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth and even forevermore. I titled the message tonight, The Watchman Who Never Fails. I want you to go back, or go forward to the book of Ezekiel, if you will, to chapter 33. In Ezekiel chapter 33, I'm going to read those first 9 verses, not as a text nor not as something that we're going to spend a lot of time, but I got a few comments I want to make about this particular passage here. In Ezekiel 33, beginning in verse 1, going down through verse 9, the Bible says, Again the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, speak to the children of thy people, and say unto them, When I bring the sword upon a land, if the people of the land take a man of their coast, and set him for their watchman, if when he seeth the sword come upon the land, he blow the trumpet, and warn the people, then whosoever heareth the sound of the trumpet, and taketh not warning, if the sword come, and take him away, his blood shall be upon his own head. He heard the sound of the trumpet, and took not warning, his blood shall be upon him, but he that taketh warning shall deliver his soul. But if the watchman see the sword come, and blow not the trumpet, and the people be not warned, if the sword come, and take any person from among them, he is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at the watchman's hand. So thou son of man, O son of man, I have set thee a watchman unto the house of Israel. Therefore thou shalt hear the word at my mouth, and warn them from me. When I say to the wicked, O wicked man, thou shalt surely die, if thou dost not speak to warn the wicked from his way, that wicked man shall die in his iniquity, but his blood will I require at thine hand. Nevertheless, if thou warn the wicked of his way, to turn from it, if he do not turn from his way, he shall die in his iniquity, but thou hast delivered thy soul. What Ezekiel's referring to there is that the city, they were set watchmen to watch the city for an enemy that might come and try to overtake the city. And the watchman had a responsibility. When he saw danger coming, he was to blow the trumpet to give warning to the people of the city so that they could take refuge, that they could prepare themselves for what was about to come. And if he blew the trumpet and then the people failed to prepare, then if the enemy came and took them and blood was shed, then what God said, that blood is upon their own head, not upon the watchman's head. However, if the watchman did not warn the people that danger was coming, the enemy was coming, and if they came in and they destroyed the place, or they took some person and shed their blood, then the blood of that person would be upon the watchman's head. And I liken that unto us today. You and I have been given a responsibility. And whether we like it or not, or whether we accept it or not, when you got saved, God made us witnesses, okay? And we are to take this gospel message to the world. And I know years ago, people used to argue with me. I haven't had this argument in a while, but it doesn't make any difference. I haven't changed my mind because of the arguments, okay? I don't worry about whether somebody agrees or not. But I sincerely believe that you liken this unto the responsibility we've been given as soul winners. We have a responsibility to tell the world about Christ, to tell the people that we can tell about salvation. Why? Because the enemy's coming. The enemy is about us. He's around us. He's all around. And if we fail to warn them about the enemy, if we fail to warn and they die without Christ, that blood is upon our hands. However, if we tell them, then, hey, I'm not responsible. You're not responsible for the decision that they make. We're only responsible for carrying the message and being the messenger. And if we do that, then that blood is upon them. If they look at you, if you tell a man about Christ and he looks at you and he says, I don't want him. That don't fit into my lifestyle. That's not on you. That's on him now. His blood's on his own hands, not on your hands, okay? And what I'm trying to get across here and setting up the text for setting up for this is simply this. There are times when you and we fail in the mission that we have been given. I promise you that every one of us have had opportunities that pass by us, and we failed to fulfill the responsibility that was given to us as watchmen over men's souls, in essence. However, I get back now to the book of Psalms and this particular psalm, and what I find here is the watchman who never fails. Sometimes I, as a human being, fail miserably. And I'm sure that I'm not alone in this, okay? Like I said this morning, there are very few people who could, like the Apostle Paul said, hey, I'm guilty of the blood of no man. I've shared it with whomever, whenever, wherever. I have not ceased to share my faith, no matter who it was with or how unpopular it may have been. I've shared it, and not many of us will ever be able to stand before God and say, I'm not guilty of the blood of no man. I know for a fact that I am, okay? And it's not because I'm proud of it. It's just the sadness of the story of humanity, that there have been times that I have not walked through the door of opportunity and shared the gospel, and that's on me. I have not always been a great watchman, okay, and sent the warning. However, we have that responsibility, but what we have in God is a watchman who never fails. He has given us warning. This whole book is packed full of warning of what's to come, and he has been very faithful in watching over us. But he not only watches to warn, but he watches over us to give protection. And so what I want to do is take this psalm and look at some things here concerning this psalm that may be an encouragement to us, at least I hope they are, but also may spark an interest in us to be a more faithful witness. And I need this probably more than you do. And so I'm not saying, that we need, even though I recognize we need this. We need it desperately. We need to be encouraged and to share our faith with others. We should never stop encouraging one another to share our faith. But at the same time, there are opportunities that we let go by, but God never does. Verse 1, when you look at verse 1, the psalmist says here, he says, I will lift up mine eyes unto the hills, from whence cometh my help. Now when you stop and you think about this, and by the way, I want to focus here for just a few minutes on the watchman. Who is this watchman that this psalmist is declaring is the one who's going to watch over and one that he's going to find to depend upon in his time of need? You and I are pilgrims that are passing through this land, and we are on this journey of life. This pilgrimage that you and I are on began the very moment that we trusted Jesus Christ as our personal Savior, and it will continue until we step out of this life into eternity, and then we will begin a new journey as citizens of heaven. Not that we're not now, but we'll start a new journey. But when we finally get home, what a glorious day, at least that should be for all of us. We ought to be looking forward to it. We look for sadness, and one of the things tonight as I think about the condition of this world. I mean, we have gotten ourselves into a spot right now that I don't think any of us can even imagine what the turnout is going to be, what's the end result. When you stop and you think about all that's going on, we have a virus that's hit that really nobody seems to know what to do anything about, and they're trying to come up with a vaccine that will protect us from it, and whether they'll be successful or not, we won't know for some time. Even if they have it, they get it. Will we really know whether it'll protect or not? It's kind of like the flu vaccine. Every fall they want you to get a flu shot. But they don't guarantee that the flu shot's going to keep you from getting the flu. In fact, everybody I knew this past year who had the flu got the flu shot. I don't know if that's a bad omen for it or not, but it's just the way it worked for me, at least. You might have known somebody that didn't. But for me, it was just everybody I talked to that had the flu this season also had the flu shot. So, but then again, what the world tries, we don't know if it'll work or not. Now we've got an incident in America now where we don't really know what is going to happen. We have a city in this nation whom some vigilantes have taken over a 6-block area, and who would have ever thought that the leaders of that city would have walked out and said, have at it, and not done anything about it. And yet we find that, and what happens if that starts spreading into other major cities in America? Where does it stop? And so we don't know, and in this time, folks, we need to be encouraged that there is one who's watching over us, who we can depend upon, who will protect us no matter what. Now, when I say that, well, I want you to understand, I'm not saying that there won't be some casualties in the fight, okay? I'm not going to say that everything's going to be easy as you journey in this journey. In fact, you've already figured that one out if you've been saved more than 15 minutes, okay? You've already figured it's not an easy journey. In fact, you go and read the Bible, and I remind you of this several times, often, simply because I want us to understand. Everything, when you're serving God, everything in life does not turn out perfectly for you. You have to understand, the Apostle Paul, he never suffered nowhere near what he suffered after he got saved. Before he was saved, he suffered more after than he did before. Because he was preaching the gospel. And by the way, folks, don't take this, what I'm fixing to say, lightly. you and I may be embarking upon a time when there will be some suffering for standing for the Lord Jesus. And I'm talking about more than just lips, okay? I'm talking about we may have to enter the battle in order to stand for the faith, and it might even cause some casualties. And so it is. We need to realize that we have a Creator. The psalmist said, I'll lift up mine eyes unto the hills from whence cometh my help. Now, is he saying that his help is going to come from the hills? No. He's got someone. In fact, when you think about this, in times past, the hills had been places of idolatry and false religion. And so the psalmist was wise enough to know that he could not find help there. However, the hill that he may be talking about might have been Mount Moriah, and as he looked up to that particular hill, he found himself in looking toward the place where he would be able to find help. And in verse 2 he says, my help cometh from the Lord which made heaven and earth. This watchman that watches over you and I, by the way, first of all, he is the creator of everything that is. Okay? There is nothing that was created that he is not. One day, he stepped out on the edge of nothing and spoke, and all of this came into a being. Now, my opinion and my thinking is this. If the very God of heaven could step out on the edge of nothing and create everything, then he's plenty capable of taking care of me. He's not going to fail. In fact, he will not fail. He will not leave us. He will not forsake us. We can count on his presence being with us. And so he's a helper that in all essence we can count on. Ephesians 3:20 says, now unto him that is able to do exceedingly abundantly above all that we ask or think, according to the power that worketh in us. There is nothing too hard for God. Your issue, my issues, they are not more difficult than God can handle. And folks, we need not to worry because our watchman is the Creator. In verse 3, he is the one who confirms us. Verse 3 says, he will not suffer thy foot to be moved. That is, he will not suffer our foot to slip. Everybody that I know anything about has a tendency at times in this walk of life to slip and fall. I don't know if you've ever had it happen to you, but I can remember several years ago coming down the steps in our house one morning. My feet went out and I hit the steps with the small of my back. I think the whole house shook when I did that. And I laid there and I knocked all the wind out of me. All I could do was go, there was nothing left to speak. We all have a tendency, we can slip. In this walk of life, folks, we can slip, if we're not careful, back into the old ways of doing things. We can slip back even into the old life. There's a thing called backsliding. The Old Testament speaks of backsliding, going back into what we were in. And folks, we have to be very careful. We have to watch ourselves that we don't allow ourselves to be overtaken. You know, we see this a lot. In fact, someone was telling me that, after this coronavirus, they expected our churches to fill up more so or more like after 9/11. You remember after 9/11 how, churches for a few weeks, people came and you were fuller than you were before, but it didn't last very long, right? And I made this comment to this person. I said, I don't expect that. What I'm expecting is to see a decline in church attendance. And they said, well, why do you see a decline coming? Because I know what habit is. And what it is, we got ourselves into the habit. It's just like folks who come to church regularly and all of a sudden you look out and they're not there on a Sunday. And they're feeling kind of guilty because they're not there if they're not sick or have a good reason for not being there. But then come the next week and they don't show up again, not nearly as guilty. By the third, fourth week, it's not a habit anymore. It's kind of like this. When we were growing up, or when our kids were growing up, Of course, this happened even before we had them. But our habit was to go to Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. Okay? That's just the way we did it. Well, we didn't change the habit when the kids come along. We kept the habit going. And in all honesty, we just didn't know what else to do. Sunday morning, we didn't take a vote where we're going to go this morning. What are we going to do on Sunday? We were going to church. Sunday was the Lord's Day. We worshiped the Lord. Wednesday night, we were not going to sit home, watch TV. We weren't going to find something else to do. Wednesday night, we went to church. However, when you start breaking the habit, you make a new one. And quite frankly, you get habits not going, and all of a sudden it's easy to stay out. And so it is. We need to realize that, hey, it's easy for our foot to slip. But if we keep our focus, as I mentioned a minute ago, on Christ, we are far less likely. He will not suffer our foot to be moved. And so we need to realize that we have to remember that He never made a house that fell, nor did He build a foundation that crumbled. You and I are still built on a solid foundation. That foundation is Jesus Christ. And as long as we build on Him, we're in good shape. Regardless of what it may look like around us, we're still in good shape. And He's not going to allow things to come to destroy us. There may be times like we feel like giving up and giving in. I can honestly tell you there's times when I feel like saying, what's the use? Why come to a place where they don't want to hear the gospel to start with and keep preaching to a people who don't seem to hear? Their ears hear. But I'm going to tell you something tonight. It's not so important for our ears to hear as it is for our heart to hear or our mind to hear. It ought to sink into the heart, and it seems like even the more you say about it, it's almost like, hey, we're even going to do less. And quite frankly, folks, we need to realize that God never built a foundation that crumbled. It's not dependent upon us, His foundation. His foundation is standing sure. He is a watchman that never fails. And when we feel like giving up and giving in, we need to realize that it wasn't the people that lifted us up out of the miry clay that put our feet on that foundation. It was Jesus Christ through His life and through His death at Calvary that gave us that ability to stand on the solid rock. And our hope is in Him. And what we need to realize that we are being held up by the mighty hand of God. He will not suffer thy foot to be moved, for He that keepeth thee will not slumber. He never, ever sleeps. There are times we grow weary and we want rest. I go back and I think about when I was growing up. I guess from the time I can't remember not doing it. We'd get up in the morning to go to school, but we had work to do before we went to school. We came home from school, and every day was the same in the sense you changed your clothes and you had work to do after school. And we moved from the farm that we was on over to a horse farm, and I thought, well, for the first time, I won't have to get up in the morning and do work before school. No. Somebody saw this barn of horses that was beside our house. And so even there, we had to get up and go feed those horses before we went to school. And when you think about that, sometimes you get tired and you get weary. When sometimes in life, we feel like we need to rest. And so we sit out on God. But who's the loser? In fact, there's a lot of Wednesday nights that I have come to church too tired to come. But you know the strangest thing I've discovered about it? Never left tired. It's always a refresher. And so it is. He's the one who I can depend upon. He's not going to nap. Sometimes I might stop and take a nap. But he doesn't. The He that keepeth us, he never slumbers. And verse 4 goes on to say, he that keepeth Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. He will see that we are not tempted beyond what we are able. He will hold us up and lift us up in the times when we are weak. He's ever awake. He doesn't grow weary. And that's one thing about God. I mean, there's a lot of things about God that I don't understand. But I don't understand that God never, or I can't fully comprehend it, let's put it like that God never gets weary. There are times when you want to, I guess, bring the hatchet down on people. He never gets tired of it. He never gets weary. He never gets, I don't want to say not disgusted with us, because I think sometimes he does. I think sometimes he looks at us and says, man, what pitiful people. But he never gives up on us. He never stops. He's always watching. His hand is always upon us. And folks, he is the watchman that never fails. Why? Because in this particular psalm, I see the strength of our watchman. If you look at verses 5 and 6, the Lord is thy keeper. The Lord is thy shade upon thy right hand. He protects us from our enemies. When we look at this, and I'll be honest with you, when you read this and you think, okay, why does it say that he is thy shade upon thy right hand? Well, when you start looking into it, here's what you find. Most people are right-handed, okay? There's a few oddballs like me who are left-handed, but for the most part, people are right-handed. Well, when a soldier went into battle, he carried two things with him. He carried his sword and he carried a shield. Generally, because he would be right-handed, he would have the sword in the right hand, and in the left hand he would carry the shield. Well, that shield to some degree would provide a shade for the left side, but with the sword out here, this side was vulnerable, okay? And so what God is saying, hey, I will protect you. I'll be the shade for the right hand, for the right side, and I'll protect you. Why? Why does he need to be, why does he use the phrase, or the word shade? Well, have you ever worked out in the sun and all of a sudden, you come into a shady area and it feels like the temperature drops about 10 degrees in the shady area? It's because in the shady area, it's much cooler. You're not nearly as heated up. And so what we need